welcome, Elf, to the interview thing, I guess.
Well, hey, I'm glad to be here. I'm glad to answer whatever questions you got here. It's always a pleasure to when I get to talk to the community like this, since we can clear the air.
Yeah. Um, what got you into Solar Conquest 2?
So it's kind of a funny story because like a lot of people in Roblox, we tend to not stay in one community. We tend to just roam around a bit. But before Solar Conquest 2, my biggest my the game I got into and the community I stayed with was Apocalypse Rising 1. Before and during its exploiter age. So after I left that because of exploiters and because of the general boredom, I roamed around a bit. I didn't really stay in one game or community until Solar Conquest 2. My first game was empty. It was a wasteland. But I did meet Finch and Tele. But the second game though is what made me stay. It was a huge battle on Javian, and Javian was losing. It was like our only planet. I was fighting alongside X Cross and a few other notable players against Celerin, who was basically this huge, big, bad, skilled guy. He wasn't really bad. He wasn't really bad though. In fact, he's probably pretty decent. But back then, we all kind of viewed him as pretty bad. But eventually we won, and that match made me stay. And plus, X Cross is kind of a great guy, so he's a great guy. He's a teacher. He's pretty good at doing what he does. He's pretty nice, merciful when it comes to fighting. So we win, and I and since that war, I kind of stayed for the next 3 days, and that's when the Discord owner and basically the top guy behind Coca Warrior Finch kind of got notice of me. So he asked me to get on. And since then, I've stuck in the community, and I'm glad I did.
Can you describe some of the processes that went into the development of the game as far as you know?
So what I do know is not a lot, but the process that we should go with is the community, vote on what you want, which is why we had the public voting, and we try to work on some of that. We try to prioritize that, I think given, but I think unfortunately we've all kind of been on a hiatus of sorts.
Why did you decide to include factions in the game? Was it because of popular demand, or was it because you thought it would bring more
Um,
players to the game, or what have you?
all right, so just so we're on the same page. By factions, you mean player factions, right?
Yes.
Okay, so that wasn't really something that we included per se. It's something that we really supported because factions like these are kind of a natural. They're kind of natural for most communities. For example, Starscape. Their factions rose because they enjoyed the game, and I think the same thing applied to us. But I think what most games do in these kinds of circumstances is that they lean into it, they support it, which I think we should. I think we should because at the end of the day, factions can help us grow as much as we help them grow.
Really? So
Yeah,
you're saying that factions are maybe an integral, maybe, well, not that
there.
as a player plays, they provide valuable feedback and help you get better.
Yes. So in fact, Diabolos Federation came from us. So we talked back and forth between me and them. There's a lot of people there I respect, and I personally think it's one of our greatest achievements for when on from Solar Conquest 2. The guys there can be pretty professional in how in how they handle sensitive subjects, and yeah, their feedback is just as important as anyone else in communities.
Can you explain what factors into the decision of what community feedback to accept and what community feedback to table, shelve, or dismiss?
I'm sorry. Could you repeat that?
Sorry. Um, um, how does how do you figure out um your feedback system? Like, how do you do how do you handle user reports or suggestions for the game besides community
Um.
voting?
Okay. So we have a few channels on our Discord, which are which is under the improve the game category, which are submit suggestions. Now, I'll be the first to admit there's a lot of suggestions that we have to sort out, and some of them get denied, some of them get approved, but we do look at them. And that is one way that they can put in their ideas to either get dismissed or approved. But lately I and a few others have been trying to have a push for those approved suggestions to come to fruition. Although I'm not very sure how well that is succeeding.
So I know the new what was it, heavy cruiser or something like that with the
I'm heavy,
planet, yeah, with the planet glassing capability. Can you describe what was the community's and your thought process on that sort of siege cruiser, I guess you could call it?
well, the heavy cruiser. Personally, I would love to see a heavy cruiser, but we haven't really got a concrete idea. We haven't really worked on it. It was mostly just the community's ideas, models, and suggestions, which they're all great. I enjoy listening to what some of their concepts regarding the heavy cruiser would be. So when we do work on it, we obviously have a lot to consider in that field.
Uh, so will the game roster remain smaller? Like, will the
Well,
ship or and ground vehicle roster remain small, alone, small, and will
well,
expand over time?
well. So I'm not very sure about that, but my hope is no. It will expand for about as big as we can allow it, because with every single ship or ground vehicle that we add, we also have to consider a lot of the balancing aspects to it, and whether or not it's overpowered or needs a buff or any of that. So I would love to see. I would, if it were up to me, and if this was a perfect, if this was a perfect scenario, I would love to include every single model submission, ship idea that people have given us, because we have a lot of people who have these great ideas, and we just want to put them in.
Right, but isn't there like a challenge to balancing a new ship
Oh,
when you
always.
eventually do put it in?
Yeah, always. In fact, some of our two most vocal per, pe- persons in regards to balancing would be New and Tale, and more power to them, since they're smart people. They know what they're talking about, and more often than not, they are right, even if frustratingly so.
Has there ever been a point in like in Soul Conquest 2's development that just feels like it was stuck?
Well, stuck, no, given the hiatus, I would say it is on hold. But then again, I think on hold and stuck kind of mean the same thing. But I do kind of have an idea for that, which is to bring in more people. That's why I and a few others have been pushing for contributors in our models and submissions, because they have potential. They have the potential to become developers.
How would you how would you choose who becomes a contributor, and how would you choose which contributors become developers?
Well, if we see a model or know or realize that you know what you're doing when it comes to Roblox Studio or Blender or Lua, we would take you in. So basically, if you got something great to show us, we would love to see it. And you are pretty likely to be. to be included in the contributor think tank.
Is there anything else you'd like to say, add, or ask me, me, me before we end?
I would just encourage people on Solar Conquest 2 to just keep being them because they're the reason I stayed. I mean, I listen, they're the reason I stayed, so it's why I want to help them in the first place. Because they all have pretty great ideas, great jokes, great people, great friends. So I will always want to help them out, and I hope that one day some of these guys can be staff contributors, or just stay long term. Just stay with us in the long term because they're great, and it wouldn't be the same. It wouldn't be the same without them.
All right. Thank you for coming by and agreeing to this interview.
Of course.